Howdy, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Inciting Incident. I'm still your host, Tim Shields. If first impressions make lasting impressions, my next guest certainly made a strong first impression on me. I recently met my next guest and new friend, Victoria Salomon, at a Dr. Joe Dispenza event. We started chit-chatting by the elevator. And what did you ask me? What are you creating an opportunity or something?
Yeah, I said, so what opportunity have you created for yourself today? Because you've just been doing that meditation.
Yeah. And then we introduced our names and she said, wait, I know you. I've heard your podcast. I want to be on your podcast. And she was getting out of the elevator and then decided it wasn't enough. So she came back in and spilled coffee all over. And then I got out and then she's like, the conversation's not done, and like spilled more coffee. I'm sure those people didn't mind it all over their feet. And then she proceeds to pull out a skeleton of a foot or something like that. So that was an interesting introduction. Definitely made a lasting impression. And then last week, we jumped on the phone and had an incredible conversation, which I almost wish we recorded, but I'm sure we will get through all of that. And if you are a fan of Inciting Incidents, this one will tickle you pink. So here we go. Victoria Salomon is a movement specialist, educator, and the founder of the ICSHEL system. Is that right? ICSHEL?
Yeah, ICSHEL, yeah.
A CPD accredited approach to structural alignment, pain relief, and embodied well-being. With over 25 years of experience in bodywork, including biomechanics, kinesiology, gait analysis, and clinical massage, her work helps people restore balance and mobility by teaching the body how to move and organize itself efficiently. Born out of her own journey through chronic illness, Victoria's approach bridges physical structure, nervous system regulation, and lived emotional experience. She teaches internationally through workshops, practitioner trainings, and online programs. And it is known, her program, for translating complex body mechanics into simple, practical practices that create lasting change. That's the hardest part of the podcast, the bio, reading the bio. So Victoria, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. Where are you right now? In Paris?
I just arrived in Paris. Literally,
okay.
Talk about arriving just in time to get on this
you nailed
podcast.
It.
I nailed it. I nailed it. Yeah.
So as you know, I start every conversation with a single question. Who were you? Where were you? And did you have any idea who you wanted to be when you were 17 years old?
Okay, so I was thinking about this on the train today between Dieppe and Paris, because obviously you asked me this when we spoke last week, and it really got me. It was a really hard question to ask, because I think as I responded then, it was like a nuclear bomb dropped in my life. Just when I was about 16 and a half, which I was still reeling from, and pretty much created who I was when I was 17. So when I was 16 and a half, my granddad, my grandfather, my last grandparent, took his own life. And it was utterly shocking for me, because my grandmother had already taken her life. And I think by the time I was 16, I felt like after a very difficult childhood, things were improving, and suddenly this suicide just completely obliterated me. So when I was 17, it wasn't so much about what was I going to do with my life. It was almost like I was incapable of doing anything. I dropped out of my studies. I got a job because I just thought I'll just work and then I don't have to function when I get home. And I didn't realize at the time when I dropped out of my studies that I was basically very ill. You know, I was trying to process this very, very difficult experience of this suicide, but on top of so much else that had happened. So I couldn't even think. I couldn't even think about my future. I was just desperately trying to cope with being in a state of complete agony, and actually emotionally. And I was physically very, very unwell. And I didn't realize. I and everyone around me just thought I was a dropout, a hypochondriac. Um, I started using drugs to try and anesthetize all the trauma. And I would say when I was 17, it was the true catalyst for the downward spiral that I was to go on for the next few years.
So what was that spiral?
The spiral, so it became addiction. So I was dealing with all these emotions. As I say, this wasn't the first thing. This was like another thing that happened. And the spiral was basically up until I was 16, I'd been a very good girl, a very shy child, young woman. I'd never been rebellious. I'd never drunk much. I'd never done anything. I actually grew up in a convent. I'm Jewish, but I'd grown up in a convent, which is a whole other story. And I left the convent when I was 16. So I had kind of this freedom, and I was really enjoying life for a few months. And then when that suicide happened, I found drugs. I found anything that would anesthetize that, what I would call this blackness. It's so strange because in our language with Dispenza, we talk about blackness and nothingness as a really good thing. But this was blackness and nothingness. I mean, it's funny because I always say these suicides propelled me into quantum, but in a way it was a blackness and a nothingness where I felt utterly isolated and completely in agony. And so, yeah, drugs, men, just do it, people pleasing, just anything, trying to, I was just living my life based on what the external world was telling me I should be doing. And even that I wasn't managing. And then it became nervous breakdowns. When I was 18, I had a nervous breakdown. When I was 19, I had a physical breakdown. And then when I was 20, I was finally diagnosed with celiac disease. So my body was basically on top of all of this emotional and family of origin stuff that was going on. My body was actually really, really ill, and I was practically in a coma by the time they diagnosed the celiac.
By the time your grandparents? Oh, by the time you were diagnosed.
Yeah, which was when I was 20. So if you look at, I think your question was, what was the downward spiral? Addiction, where I was trying to deal with this chronic emotional pain, but I was also actually ill. It was clear that this was like yet another thing. As I say, this wasn't the first thing. And clearly it tipped my body into a state where it literally couldn't process, it couldn't absorb. And within my body, that autoimmune disease just started attacking me internally. And your blood count is low if it's 11. They would say you're anemic if it goes down to 11. Mine ended up going down to 4, by which point you're meant to be in a coma. You know, you're just like, so it got really, really terrible. And
so what happens when you get diagnosed? Like, do you start to make changes?
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed, so they put a camera in my stomach eventually. So they'd always looked at my family history. So between the age of 17 to 20, they could see manic depression in my father, in my grandparents. They could see all of this. So every symptom I had, they thought was just maybe my menstrual cycle or anxiety and depression. Once I was diagnosed, and they actually finally put a camera inside me, and they saw that with celiac, it basically destroys the villi, which are the kind of fingers that is the area that absorbs all our nutrients from our food. And they saw I just didn't have any. So I was completely malnourished, and it was really serious. And the specialist said to me, give it 6 months of not eating gluten. It's funny now because everyone's like, gluten. But this is really serious. I mean, this is like 35 years ago, 36 years ago. And the specialist said, you need to stop eating this thing called gluten. And I was like, what on earth is that? And they just gave me the list of what this stuff is in. And he said to me, in 6 months, you're probably going to feel very different. And it was the truth. Within 6 months, I understood how people smiled and meant it. Like I was a different human. And so it's very interesting, the whole gluten thing that we hear today, because actually when you're celiac, when that's the thing, it's very serious. And my actual doctor, who'd misdiagnosed me for years, when I told him it had finally been diagnosed, he said to me, oh, that's so strange. He'd only had 2 patients with it before, and they'd both been in mental institutions for schizophrenia. And
Wow.
and that is my experience of gluten. So for me, if I eat gluten, the physical impact in my gut is the least of my problems. It's far more my cognitive well-being. And I've been around a lot of suicides, and in my right mind, I would never have suicidal ideation. But if I get gluten in me by accident, at that point, literally all the chemicals in me are going, not since I've been in the dispenser community and doing what I do, but historically, all I would hear is, I want to die. I want to die, literally like heroin pumping around my body. So celiac, even though it's in the digestive tract, it was never the digestive aspect. It was the chemicals that it would create that would literally just make me think I want to kill myself. I never did. I never tried. But
I mean, thank goodness I wouldn't have bumped into you in the elevator.
Yeah. I just wouldn't and couldn't. But that's the messaging. I can understand how someone kills himself when I eat gluten, or historically when I've eaten gluten, because of what happens. Yeah.
So if things cascade from energy to emotions to biology to chemistry, what do you think was the trigger for that celiac? The suicides, or earlier than that?
I think literally. So I'd grown up with a father constantly trying to kill himself. So I was always around this anyway. I was always around the dread of it. I was always around the trauma of it. I witnessed my father doing a suicide attempt right in front of me when I was 10 years old. Or that after that, I would grow up with, so many versions of trauma. So I think, and when my grandfather did it, I had my mother and stepfather and my father and my stepmother, and none of them cared. None of them. They were all like, my dad was going, he was pleased his dad was dead. My stepfather was going, what a coward. And I'm like literally sitting there, just
completely unsafe,
devastated that I'd lost the grandparent who in a way was a safe person in amidst a horror situation when I was growing up. And, no one told my school. No one said anything. So I think I literally couldn't process this toxicity. And the celiac plexus in the body is where the sympathetic nervous system meets the parasympathetic. So the solar plexus is the celiac plexus basically in here. So I think it's really interesting if we think about everything we know about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and if we're in too much fight or flight for an extended period, we go into the parasympathetic collapse and the numbness and the dissociation. So there was no energy left for that area of my body to function. I literally from everything I understand now about the body, it makes perfect sense. It actually is what should have happened based on what was happening. It is like the body just going, no, I'm switching off, and therefore by switching off this area, utterly powerless, utterly helpless, utterly hopeless, utterly in grief. I mean, from the biomechanical aspect, a posture of grief is then going to crush down on that area. You know, the area of the body, both in terms of the energy centers, but also in terms of the biomechanics, was, you know, I'm not going to use the word, but completely, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
tell me about your 20s then.
So
So you
my
get diagnosed moving forward.
Yeah. So I'm 20. I have my 21st birthday. I've got this diagnosis. I start to be able to party. It was like when all the kind of acid house and rave scene was going on. It was really fun. I was finally like my friends. I had this awful situation when my education had completely been trashed. So I still had a real chip on my shoulder because all my friends had gone off to university and I was just working. But I moved to London and I got a job working for Margaret Thatcher's husband as his PA, which was mental. Like, how did
You left that detail out last time.
yeah. Like, I moved to London, and I actually moved to London because I was in a scene. I live in a real party town in Brighton in the south coast of England, and I needed to go somewhere where that scene wasn't around me. So I moved to London. It was like the recession in 1991. And I was trying to get a job. And anyway, long story in the end, I went off to Conservative Central Office in Westminster and they didn't want me, but they said, there's another job we think you'd be perfect for. And I ended up working for Dennis Thatcher, which was the most mad thing ever. And so I was working in the House of Parliament. I was working in Downing Street. I had this. So my life went, it was like rags to riches in terms of having been so absolutely devastated and so ill to actually having an experience that was, if you were going to work doing a job you didn't particularly like, at least do it in an environment which is interesting and, you know, kind of relevant in some way. So that was great. And that lasted for 2 or 3 years. And then he completely retired and I went and got other jobs which I didn't particularly like in the city in London. And then I went off to India and I was basically, even though I was healthy, I was still living in the legacy of having not completed my education in a way that had me in an environment where I felt like I had decent self-esteem, and also everything I did was about trying to please my parents. I literally believed that the main thing in life was to make my parents happy. I just didn't even know that there was this thing about being able to do something you loved. It just didn't even occur to
You
me.
had no identity.
No. And I
Yeah.
went off to India when I was 24, just before my 25th birthday, because a friend was getting married. So I took 3 weeks off my career in the city, where I was like an administrative assistant. And I go to India and I see this whole other world. And this voice was just screaming inside of me, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And I realized I was selling my heart and soul out to a rat race in the city in London, doing a job I hated, where no one cared about me, where it wasn't relevant. It didn't make me happy. And I came back to England absolutely depressed, like almost in shock that I was living a life which made me so unhappy. I was just, couldn't have been more disconnected from anything, but I didn't know what I was meant to be doing. And so I knew I wanted to go back to India. I wanted to travel. And so I started to only work the hours I was being paid for in the city, which you don't do. Yeah, you need to be giving your heart and soul. And within a few weeks, they reeled me in with constructive dismissal, to give me a warning. And by about the October, they wheeled me in and said, that's it, we're getting rid of you. And the thing that terrified me most was telling my father, because as I say, everything had been about this sense of I've got to keep, for me to be worth anything, I've got to do what my parents say. So I was absolutely terrified. It was one of those situations where they walked me out. They had the taxi outside the office, and it took me about 24 hours to get the guts to even call my dad and tell him that I had lost my job. And this is a 25-year-old woman responding like a
Yeah.
9-year-old child. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's really where your growth was
yeah,
stunted.
yeah. And
So what did he say?
he was really calm, and he seemed really supportive. And I was like, whoa, that was like a normal conversation with my dad. So it was really calm. And then 4 days later, he killed himself.
Wow.
That was the last conversation I ever had with my father. And so within 4 days, I'd lost my career and I'd lost my dad. And I mean, that was that. There are moments. I mean, for me, there'd be many moments, but that was horrific,
Yeah.
beyond horrific. And I went straight into very intensive addiction again. I left. I left the country. I mean, but the craziest thing about this was actually not that he did it. It was that I saw him do it for the week before he did it, exactly where he was found. I saw him and I kept seeing it. And
Now, were you like eyes closed or just walking down the street and getting these visions or what?
So I was, as I said, I was losing my job. And in that last few weeks, there was 4 weeks, they'd given me a 4-week warning. And in that time, I really upped my game and I started doing lots of work and being the best I could in my job, because it didn't feel nice to feel that they were trying to push me out. And I would sit at my desk and I would keep getting these flashes of my dad just lying dead on the floor. And I would think I was going mad, and to the point I would want to pick up the phone to check he was alive. I mean, I literally thought, Victoria, for goodness sake, just what's wrong with it? It didn't kind of occur to me, or it was too scary to occur to me. I mean, my dad, as I say, had tried this a lot when I was a child, but he hadn't tried it so much recently. And so when I got the call, my response was, because in what I saw, no one was telling me it had happened. And when I got the call, the first thought I had was at least someone's found him and told me, which is a really crazy. And this was, and then I would just have experience after experience where I would see death before it happened. And this was my experience in my 20s with quantum, with 5D. And I think even when my grandfather did it when I was 16, 17, I think when you have a really shock death of someone you love, I really believe part of you goes with them, the parts that are that relationship. For me, and I can only speak for myself, you are then living, when you haven't been able to say goodbye to someone, when it's that shock, elevated emotion that is not a good one, but it is still extraordinarily elevated and happening on levels of frequencies that the average human is never going to get propelled into that. I know that because I've worked with a lot of humans, and I know there's a continuum of, suicide, I think, is one of the hardest things to navigate, because you're blaming yourself for someone else's death when actually you had nothing to do with it, and yet you feel it's a crazy thing, which obviously I've worked through.
You can't really process it.
Not at the time. No, I mean, now it's very, very different. I have a very different perspective on that. I think when I look at what I've created, when I look at what I do with people, when I look at, how the darkness of that made me have to do something different because it couldn't go another, well, it could have gone another generation. But so, on some level, clearly within in my family lineage, ancestrally, there was a contract on some level, for Victoria, the person, a heartbreaking contract. But for Victoria, the professional who is out there doing something that is very important in the world, it was something that needed to happen for something else to happen.
And your soul evolution as well.
Yeah.
And then what about your mom?
Well, my mother, I mentioned to you last week. So my first major traumatic experience was when I was 4, because my father had tried to kill my mother. Now, he was put in prison for a bit, but she still took him back. But he did finally leave after one of his suicide attempts when I was 10. So my mother had remarried when I was 14 years old. So within all of this, I don't want to go too much into my relationship around my mother because it just doesn't feel appropriate at the moment, other than to say she was not able to protect us because she was not able to protect herself. And I kind of need to leave that there right now because she's not very well. And I think I'm just going to leave that one over there right now. But she's still alive. She's very elderly and not well at the moment. But my mother was not, I didn't have an emotionally supportive mother who could help me navigate any of that.
Yeah.
That her response would have actually been, Victoria, you just need to put it all behind you. It was completely devoid of the complexities of everything we know about trauma and epigenetics and all of that. Completely devoid and part of the problem, not part of the solution, in terms of my kind of finding a way to heal and to learn to live in a body that has been around and witnessed to some really, really heartbreaking and tragic experiences.
Yeah. I mean, you were saying something about, when you had kids, that sort of cooled off the fire, or like you were trying to learn how to live in your body before you killed it.
Yeah. So
then how do you go from there? Go into that, but then how do you go from there into your work and what you've created?
Yeah. So when I traveled after my dad's suicide, I traveled for a couple of years. I spent a lot of time in India and, I climbed the highest mountain, did the geographicals, did the drugs, just made myself more and more ill, realized that just because you're as far as you can get physically, it's all still inside you. So by the time I discovered things like Reiki when I was on that journey and a few other healing art type things. And I came back to the UK and had a complete breakdown, as in an emotional breakdown. And I was trying to get a job and I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I was put on by the government something called incapacity benefit because somehow someone clocked that I was emotionally quite unstable. It wasn't my family, it was people in the world. And when I mentioned what had happened, a government doctor just said, I'm signing you off for 2 years. He just said, Victoria, you may not have been to university, but you've been in the university of life. And I'm telling you, there are some things you need to process before you move on. And he said, and it's going to be like opening a can of worms. When you start, it's not going to suddenly resolve. It's going to be a process. How that happened, because today that wouldn't happen. I mean, clearly something greater and more beautiful was keeping an eye on me, just as I'd been put into a convent when I had a very difficult time at home. Something was always around to protect me. Yeah, I mean, we know, don't we now, because we do everything we do. We know there is so much more than what we are aware of in this 3D world. And so I went when they'd signed me off work, but I went and did a holistic therapies course because I felt really pulled to that. And that whole thing initially, when you've been through something and you want to help everyone heal and, you're going to like heal people and this and that. And you don't, initially, it's not about that. It's just about the journey of healing oneself. So I did this holistic therapies course, but I was still struggling with addiction. So I felt like a total fraud and I didn't actually start doing it. I didn't practice with clients at all. I was in my late 20s. And then I got pregnant and I'd met this guy in India and I hadn't seen him for a couple of years after I left. And then we met up again. And this was not, if I'd been well, this would not have probably been a man I would have got together with. But we were, he seemed very protective and on many ways, just seemed like an opportunity after having been. And after about a year together, we got pregnant. And I'd never planned to get pregnant. And my first thing was, I can't have a child. I should terminate it. But then the thought of being responsible for the death of anyone or anything, having gone through this whole process around the suicide, was like, I couldn't do that. So I had one daughter, and then 2 or 3 years later, I had another. And my real rock bottom was my pregnancy and breastfeeding with my second daughter, because I was still struggling with addiction, which I'd managed to stand up to with my first daughter with that pregnancy. And because my relationship was very, very difficult, and I already had one child when I was pregnant with the second, it was harder. And for various reasons, that's where I hit my rock bottom. That's where I realized I really was an addict. I literally couldn't put down something which I knew was harming me and was potentially harming my daughter. And that was my rock bottom. And so I got myself into 12-step recovery. I got myself into more kind of healing environments, but really 12-step recovery was very important for me, sitting in rooms and starting to listen to other people. I'm realizing that based on what I'd been through, there was no way I could have been any different than what I was. And rather than trying not to be what I was, or it was understanding why I was the way I was. And so those fellowships, to me, saved me, listening to the experiences, that experience, strength and hope that they talk about, and also listening to people in AA. I wasn't an alcoholic, but it was really helpful because these were people who were like my father, who didn't kill themselves. They recovered. So, when we're in the dispenser community, we're thinking about unlimited possibility. This began to show me that not everything ended in that terror, because I suffered with the most horrendous levels of chronic anxiety you can imagine. I mean, all this stuff had just happened. And so once I'd kind of I really was on top of the addiction after a couple of years, completely clean. It just happened. It was like one day, this is so funny. I was just like sitting somewhere and I thought, oh my God, I trained in reflexology once. And I just went on Vistaprint and I just made these little business cards called This Little Piggy Reflexology. It was like, sometimes we just do something. And then they arrived and then they were on my sideboard and a friend came around and she said, oh, do you do reflexology? And I was like, well, actually, I did train in it, but I never did it for whatever reasons. And she was like, and that was it. And then 5-minute walk from my home, a GP surgery wanted a massage therapist and person in their clinic. And for the next 13 years, I was devoted to working on people's bodies. And I went and I did a degree in clinical massage. orthopedic assessment. I trained in systematic kinesiology. And the trauma body was always in the center of this for me. I mean, this was hours and hours of just studying bodies. And then even with body work, I felt there was something missing. I was seeing people pop with all these kind of trauma responses, myofascial release or whatever. But this kind of, it was just really interesting to me. There was still something missing. And then I went and trained in biomechanics because my teacher, I saw this book called What the Foot. And I knew that no matter what I trained in, reflexology was still a really powerful thing, and no one had been able to give me the answer as to why the feet were so powerful. No one had given me this answer. So I went and trained with the amazing teacher Gary Ward in London, and I was in this room with Olympic coaches, these major, these guys wanted gold medals in the Olympics, and I was never about that. I was a trained sports therapist, but more to heal pain and injury, not for performance. And I started doing the biomechanics and the realigning the bones and the joints through movement. And I had probably one of the most profound trauma releases I'd ever had in that room. And they were amazing. They got me out the room. It was a room of 40 people. It was not the place for that. But the guys, even though it wasn't about that, they were amazing with me and got me out the room. And, he just started moving my rib cage and my pelvis. And he was like, how do you even breathe? And as he did this, I just wept and wept. And the thing that had triggered me was an alignment that they were getting us to do from our feet to our thigh bone and pelvis, whatever it was. It clearly aligned something, that all the shock and all the trauma had been a misalignment that had never left my body. And then I started noticing things in my outside environment changing. And what I noticed was that as the relationships between the different parts of me internally shifted, the relationships in my life, weird, strange things were going on. So I went back to these guys and I said, listen, there's something else going on here. Like, this is not just aligning bones to get good performance. Something else is going on. Like, as the body realigns, other things are happening. And they just said, yes, Victoria, but we can't get that out in the room. That's not what people are coming to us for. And I'm like, but there's a whole energy body here. And this is working with, and they said, yeah, but it's not what we're here to do. So I was left with this strange experience of realizing I was working with something, and then I was working with body after body after body. And I was seeing that as we started to teach them to move their bones and joints correctly, and the containers that held that nervous system were functioning differently, their lives were also changing. But it was still a bit messy, and it was a bit of throwing mud to see what stuck. And then when COVID hit in, none of my clients could come to me because we weren't meant to put our hands on people. And I had to leave the medical surgery where I worked. And I took everything I knew and put it into a very simple program, which one of my teachers, I was really impressed with a particular strategy he had, which they did with us. And I put it together. But instead of putting it together, this 7-week program for practitioners and high level people, I put it together like the idiot's guide for a human who knows nothing about their body. So biomechanics for the average person who just needs to walk and doesn't need to be an Olympic gold medalist. And so I put this 7-week course together to realign every joint in the body in 3D. And week 1 was teaching people how to 3-dimensionally realign every joint in their foot. Week 2 was to 3-dimensionally realign every joint in the pelvis. So this is like backwards and forwards, up and down, and rotation. This is 3-dimensional, like not the external environment, not the material world, but what you've actually got inside you. This stuff is actually really cool and really important. And then week 3 was the spine, teaching people just to realign their spine. Week 4 was the rib cage. Week 5 was the shoulders and arms. Week 6 was the neck, and week 7 was the skull and the jaw. And so I was just teaching this because, no one had anything better to do during COVID. So these people with all these pathologies were turning up, and suddenly they were resolving all their pathologies just through this very simple 7-week program, teaching them to realign their joints. And I'm there in my front room teaching this, going, oh my goodness, every human can do this for themselves. So I put it all together on a learning platform, and I went back to my, the guys I'd learned with, and I just said, look, you're out there teaching this in the world to real professionals. I've taken the very basics here, and I've created a very basic, simple program, and I need your blessing because, I'm very respectful. I believe we're all, standing on the shoulders of our teachers, and the foundation of anything we do. I always want to really acknowledge where I've come from. Yeah, because that's the essence, isn't it? That's in a way the DNA of learning, how we evolve. And they were very gracious. And I said, what I've now done is what you said you didn't do. I've taken the simplicity of what you do, and I've put the emotional body in with it. And and this is now doing what you said you could not get out in the room. And this is it.
Yeah. It makes total sense. We, in the Dispenza world or any, sort of alternative healing, the focus is usually consciousness and energy, but the body is the vehicle of the consciousness. And if that is out of alignment, it's going to throw a lot of other things out of alignment. It's interesting because, I just met you, and then I'm going to be working with somebody who's kind of doing the same thing, feet to jaw. So that brings my question, why are the feet so powerful?
Okay, so this is now me coming as an expert in terms of what I believe, because no one could give me the answer. So this is now my answer after years and years. There are 26 bones in the feet. When people talk about grounding, be it in yoga or, maybe people are working with Qigong and Tai Chi, they're not actually working with the knowledge of what is the machinery in there. What are they grounding? What is actually, do they know the 26 bones in the feet? Do they know the 33 joints in the feet? Do they know the mechanics of these incredible structures? I mean, they are just awesome. Like, we have this magical power tools inside our body. And all those little bones are designed to move in a particular way in 3D. Now, of course, entwined between all these bones, we have ligaments which attach joints to joints, but we also have the tendons of all the muscles. There's, hundreds of muscles in the feet, but we also have the big muscles of the legs coming down and attaching into the feet. And then in all of this, we have all the fascia, the trains of fascia. If anyone's watching this, there's all the thing about the connective tissue. So we've got and then we've got the nerves, and we've got the blood, and we've got all of this stuff going on in these 2 feet. They're not just feet. They're not just feet. They're not just like this superficial bit of skin with 5 toes. They are incredible. And so the way they move and the way they connect with the ground, these 26 bones and these 33 joints, whilst taking the weight, the gravity, the center of mass of our whole body. I mean, it's miraculous. And when that works well, it impacts every single other joint and every single other system, and is supporting all of that above. But when those bones and joints have forgotten, because of compensations and injuries, how to function, It's bad news. It's like the feet, everything starts in the feet, the mechanics of the
The
feet.
foundation.
Mm-hmm. So the pelvis needs to be what we call anteriorly tilt, is when your tailbone goes back to, if 12 o'clock was in front of you, 6 o'clock was behind you, the tailbone needs to be able to travel back to 6 o'clock for an anterior tilt. The problem is, for most people, they're stuck in that. And anyone stuck in that will usually have flat feet, because the feet can't arch. The mechanics of the feet can't what we call supinate and create an arch correctly, and that, unless, well, the pelvis can't tilt under, I should say, unless the feet can get an arch in them. Now, we're not here to go through biomechanics, but this pelvis is holding the parasympathetic nervous system, and the rib cage is holding the sympathetic nervous system. And those structures cannot move correctly. They cannot find their correct ranges of motion if the 26 bones in the feet don't move correctly. It's just not possible. So the body becomes riddled with compensations. So what happened that day when I had that experience with my teachers in that first it was probably a 4-day workshop with them, the first one I did with them, my feet would have started to move differently. My pelvis would have then tucked under, which meant my parasympathetic would have been able to switch on, which meant that all the dissociation, all the unconsciousness, all the lockdowns, all the collapse, all the cortisol, suddenly the environment was switched on so that could finally move and start to regulate. And people do not know what they don't know. And of course they don't know it. And people are spending hours and hours and, well, years in talking therapies whilst the mechanics of their body can't switch on. Hours and hours in meditation when mechanics can fast track that. So I adore meditating, but I adore to meditate to create a life I love. I do not meditate to try and live with pain and chronic disease. Yes, I'm still unraveling celiac. That's an interesting thing for me. But so many people are doing what they're doing to try and live with pain or to try and fix pain. And they do not understand how to drive the vehicle they live in. They just don't know. They don't know.
That's why. Yeah. So how did you wind up at a Dispenza event?
So Dispenza really came to me during my divorce period, which took 8 years, and he showed up from so many different angles. When I look back on it, it's quite extraordinary. You know, it was clearly it was coming, whether I knew it or not. It was almost in my environment, and I didn't see it initially. It just came from many different directions, because when you start realigning your biomechanics and you get the relationships in your body functioning correctly, you will no longer be able to tolerate or live with external dysfunctional relationships. And my 20-year relationship with my husband was built on codependency. It was an enmeshment built on our dynamics, which were not like two trees standing side by side. It was like two trees that had been in a storm and had kind of fallen into each other. You know, it was like, this was not, and it got to a point where I realized what I was role modeling to my daughters, just as, you know, when they were very young, I'd had to go into 12-step for using particular substances. Once my older daughter was nearly 16, I needed to go into 12-step again, because I realized I was in a horrendously codependent marriage where I could no longer be what I was in that marriage. I couldn't do that to my daughters. I couldn't role model that. So I basically changed that relationship, and in leaving him, I remember going to my younger daughter, it was her bat mitzvah. I had all his family there, and I remember just sitting in the car with Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, that meditation. And just every time during this week where I was needing to deal with all his family, I was just listening to that, space. It was just that someone had given it to me. And I swear that meditation was what got me through dealing with some of the most horrendous, it just gave me the coherence I needed whilst trying to go divorce a man, but being with all the family and everything and needing to be like, life was fine. I kind of backed off dispenser whilst I was going through the hardest part of my marriage breakdown. I used quite more specific things to deal with kind of narcissistic abuse syndrome and things like that, but in quantum, not like sitting and talking about it, but looking at, okay, what is it ancestrally? What do I need to do that, out there, that's going to resolve this, rather than making it about him. I just had to stop making it about the man in my life and make it about why I'd created that situation. And then, to be honest, once I got through the divorce, that's when dispenser really showed up for me. I wasn't completely through the divorce, but I was through most of the difficult part. And my dog was attacked, and my daughter was it happened between the two of them. And it was horrific. My dog nearly died, and it was a victim thing. Shouldn't have happened. I could have gone nuts at the person. It was a neighbor up the road. And I remember just saying to myself, if I can get Blue out of doggy hospital, I will sit with him. And I went and found that meditation, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, because I knew I could have gone and, had a whole fight and taken it to court with the dog, whatever. And I was like, no, I'm going to use that energy to do something extraordinary in the world. Like I could go and fight, or I could use that energy to do something amazing. And
this is a really important point, I think, to hammer home, which, I've learned it's taken a long time, but when that thing happens, it's easy to, victim is the simplification of the energy and the situation, but it's really just about transmuting the energy in that moment.
Yeah.
And it opens up doorways of possibility.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just go into the reaction and you go into the victim, you have one path.
Yeah.
But when you free up the energy from that focal point of awareness, infinite possibilities open up, which you just did. So I wanted to just point that out to listeners.
Yeah. And Blue came out of hospital, and I sat him on my lap, my little Blue. And people had even raised money to help him. He's a therapy dog. He's extraordinary. He has a big impact on a lot of people. So this was a big deal to a lot of people that he'd been attacked. And I sat there and I just meditated. And this was in about April 2022. And I meditated, and then I just came to me, where is my tribe? Where are the other people who are sitting, meditating right now with dispenser? Where are they? And I went onto my laptop, and he was coming to London. And he was coming to London in the August. And of course which is crazy, because that's the only time I think, he's done one of those big ones in London. Yeah. And I didn't know you had to have the finger on the button, but I had my finger on the button. And what was really interesting, Blue got better. Blue was fine.
Finger on the button because he sells out so quickly.
Yeah, because he sells out so quickly. And I was like, I knew I had to be there. And also it was interesting to me because all the suicides had happened in London. So it was a really energetically for me to be able to do this work and find my tribe in a city which, I left after my dad's suicide. It was very triggering for me sometimes to be in the geographical area of some of those places. And literally the week before that, or a few days before that London retreat, my whole program was accredited by external people. And organizations. So the timing was interesting. The timing was interesting. And I didn't know Dr. Joe did walking meditations. And of course, I teach people to walk. Like biomechanics is your gait. It's the way you put one foot in front of the other. And so to then find myself walking in London with 2,500 people in my hometown, and it was, you just don't know, do you? And I had no idea that this community, I thought you would just go to one workshop and that would be it. But then the calling to me, I literally, even when I left there, I thought, well, that's that. But within a couple of months, I was just very much getting in meditation. You have to go to Cancun. It's like, why do I need to go to Cancun? And I just kept getting, you have to go to Cancun. And my younger daughter, after my first retreat, I think I may have said this to you last week. I went home, and about 10 days later, my younger daughter was like, Mummy, can I ask you something? And I was like, yeah, of course, sweetheart. She's like, have you kissed a man? And I was like, no, why? She's like, you just seem so happy all the time. I don't know what's wrong with you. So the girls, my kids everyone saw from that retreat that something had happened. I didn't talk about it. I wasn't interested in, because for me, I'd gone into that retreat with levels of chronic anxiety that I was still battling with, to be honest with you. I could get very easily triggered. And what I definitely got after that first retreat was chronic anxiety had left the building, which, people around me, my children, and also any reactivity to do with my ex-husband had left the building. It just didn't exist anymore.
You literally stepped into a whole different timeline.
Yeah.
You left that person in the past, that trauma, those triggers, the anxiety in the pain body, and you stepped into something. So then you go to Cancun, and what happens?
So the thing with Cancun was 20 years before, I'd been told to take the name of my business, which is IXCHEL. And even back then, I was kind of just told, you're going to grow into that name, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I then realized that Cancun, the name of my business, is Ixchel, and Ixchel is the medicine goddess of Cancun. And in Mexico, they're all about the bones and the stones. And I was always talking about the bones and the stones. And Ixchel is the medicine goddess of Cancun. So Dr. Joe is doing his stuff there, and he got me there. He got me there. And the community got me there. So when I went to Cancun, I didn't have a ticket because it had already sold out by this point. But when I realized it wasn't till then that I actually realized that where Dr. Joe has this hub in Mexico is exactly where the kind of medicine and energy that I'd been working with was located as well. So I went there. I just got myself there, and then turned up as a walk-in. Got in, and it was just, I got in that meditation. Through meditation, I got, you've got to go back, you've got to set up a wellness community, you've got to set up a practitioner training, get other practitioners, and you've got to write a book. It's like literally singing there. Like Excel was powering me up, all this going on in meditation or whatever. But a year later, I went back there, and the book had gone bestseller because I'd set up the community and everyone had bought the book. It was, and as an editor, you will know as an editor that to have turned around publishing a book in that time and set up a practitioner training and set up a community, we're working with unlimited possibility. The thing is, when you've got good mechanics, and when you've got the meditation, when you put these two, they are actually completely different things, but I describe it like they touch each other like the tips of two feathers. One picks up where, it is 3D and 5D. So the 3D of the mechanics, think of a car, I kind of describe it like you can put the best fuel into a car, and I see the meditation we do is the best fuel. And also the intention, you've got to have the intention of turning that key or the car is not going to start, and I do think that is our kind of sending out our thought, being the magnet, that's all kind of intention and being open to movement. But if one of those wheels is going in the wrong way, doesn't matter the fuel you put in or turning on, that car is not going to move very easily. And that is the 3D mechanics. And it will not, unless you are very lucky by accident, resolve itself. The mechanics in your body right now believe that they are doing exactly the right thing until you come in and you do this very mechanical thing and reset them. And then every joint in your body is an energy center. So, excuse me, from my perspective, true enlightenment isn't a moment in time and a eureka moment. True enlightenment is when all these joints are working in beautiful functional relationship with each other. You literally feel enlightened, those elevated feelings and emotions that we can get in through our meditation. There is another version of that with mechanics where center of mass is either working against you, or from the feet up, you can articulate every bone and joint and structure in 3D, and they will regulate every energy center for you mechanically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, first of all, I just want to say what a confirmation of your curiosity and your calling that 20 years later you wound up at the center point of what the company you named yourself afterwards. And then I also love the idea of joints being energy centers.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like the entire body is a collective energy center. Even cells and mitochondria are really energy centers, but there are these, I'm not sure what the word is, but these inflectionary points or something where there is more energy required. And it's interesting because I just ran into you. I just had a podcast before this, and the next project I'm going to be on is really about, I'm going through this person's whole protocol, and it is going to be about the mechanics, but the relationship of the mechanics to the nervous system and also to cerebral spinal fluid and a couple other pieces. So I started, she's like, I want you to start, writing about all this stuff. And I had this really bad back pain and I could barely get out of a chair. And one day I just sat on the front porch and I wrote, just about my nervous system, starting with my parents. And I wrote maybe 15 pages. And when I was done, I could get out of the chair, which was wild. So there was some sort of energetics involved in this thing that I had been holding on to the whole time. But the first time we had a conversation, she's like, and I now I look at people, I actually watch people's gaits and everything as well and look at their face. And she was like, well, one eye is a little bit, up from the other. And that means you favor this side. She said, I bet one hip is, I always thought like one leg was longer than the other, but I had this soccer injury in college where I had a stress fracture in my femur. And then the coach kept pushing me. And then I developed a stress fracture in the other femur. So like my hips are all, but the summary of all of this is like, what I'm curious about is like, what is my human potential if my biomechanics are in alignment? So that's really, I think, what this book is maybe going to be about.
Yeah.
But it's like human potential isn't just energetics. It's the mind, body, and the spirit.
Yeah.
We always kind of think about like human potential. What can we think and dream? But you have to have the biomechanics, the vehicle of consciousness, like you said, like one tire can't be going off to the right. So I'm so fascinated by this. Obviously, it was no coincidence that you spilled coffee all over the place and pulled out your foot.
I know my foot. So the interesting thing is, I just ran a masterclass for 3 days, actually, where I really tried to break it down so that people could understand through little analogies what are biomechanics. So one of the things I like to say is muscles and connective tissue, imagine they're like a wet towel. Yeah. So, and or a wet piece of clothing. You want to wring that piece of clothing. You haven't got a spinner. You need to wring it. So how do you do that? you create a mechanism. So you're going to put one fist here, which is a joint, and you're going to put one fist there, which is a joint. Okay. Yeah, anyone knows they need to do that. But if both my joints move in the same direction, it's not going to ring that towel, is it? It's not going to ring out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is interesting because this is where, when Dr. Joe talks about the piezoelectric effect, this is where biomechanics come into this every step you take. And this is the real power of I think, what we do. Now, what needs to happen to create the energy and the force field to ring that water, or it would be energy? My fists, my joints need to go in opposite directions, don't they? That is a mechanical movement. And if I do that, we can all feel it. We can all feel the ringing going on. That is then creating the impact that's pushing and pumping something out of that area. And then, of course, you have the momentum where that releases. So that mechanism could be going on. That power could be going on in about 175 places at once in your body if you correctly align every joint in phases of gait, in the way the postures. Let's say there are 6 postures that the body should go through with one footstep. So your body could be doing that, and you need something called propulsion. Most people don't have it. Anyone with flat feet do not have propulsion. Anyone who walk in specific ways, they don't have propulsion. So their energy is all going into moving themselves forwards rather than this mechanics. And this is where those 26 bones in the feet come in, just propel you forwards. Okay. Everything is creating propulsion and energy in the body. So people say to me, Victoria, how do you actually manage to do what you do? And I just say, I just have a really good propulsion. That's it. And you can have that too. Yeah, but you do need to know how to use the 26 bones in both feet correctly. And then that creates all of that spiraling going on in every single muscle group. But so when people think muscles are the leaders of the body, when people tell themselves to relax muscles, it just makes me crazy. Because actually the muscles can't control the joints. It doesn't work like that. The joints control the muscles. You know, an analogy I use is, think of a door. Does the door move because the door moves, or is it the hinge, the tiny little hinge that creates the movement of the door? Yeah. If a hinge is off, it's very heavy to move the door, correct? So all of these joints and these hinges, you know, you've got like 350 hinges in your body. And are they working in 3D? So they can, if we think about stones and initially like the flints that made fire, yeah, they make energy that, so that has the potential to be going on in every single joint in your body if you are aligning them and activating them correctly. And then how do we make that so simple to learn that a 10-year-old or a 90-year-old can switch all of that on in 7 weeks? And that's what we do.
Well, I hope that when you're in the US, I can check out one of your workshops, because it just sounds incredible.
We do it all online. So the thing is,
cool.
People
but you do some live stuff.
But very often I won't let people come into a room with me until they've done the online program, because you basically need to get down into your pants, or if you're a woman, your bra and knickers, and look at yourself in the mirror and start working out. You know, obviously we teach 48 practices in 7 weeks. So between 5 and 7 practices a week, 5 and 7 practices for each part of the body. And our main thing is that you, whoever you are, starts to take a very good look at yourself and start to self-assess what your body's doing in the safety of your own home. Because if you've got a misalignment, coming into a group and releasing that in a group is not a safe, trauma-informed way to do this.
That's true.
Your nervous system needs to be in a very safe environment where these new alignments can start, because the adrenaline and cortisol is going to go on the move. So we have to make sure when people realign that they are doing it in a way where the energy, if it's
Wow.
going to move, is not going to kind of rocket somewhere else and cause chaos. So I am very, very specific about the way my methodology is taught, because it has to be trauma informed, because the biomechanics is holding all the old lockdowns. So, but so long as it's taught from the feet up, with what we call the foot tripods and the correct mechanisms for the pelvis, it's totally safe. And humans start to learn, like, that energy is a bit like a naughty puppy dog. Yeah, I think trauma energy, cortisol, adrenaline, it's like a naughty puppy. If you train it correctly to move in the right way and to do what it's there to do, which is actually to get the extremities to fight or flight. So you don't need to do that, but you do need to get the joints switching, the muscles on and off, to use those stress chemicals and trauma chemicals, and just train the body to move the way it's meant to.
The the mystery is just an endless fractal.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew you could just look at your feet and go into some, endless fractal of how it connects to everything else. But we're running out of time here. So I want to just leave you with some, like, a couple, like three kind of quick questions. So if someone feels disconnected from their body and overwhelmed by pain, what is the first gentle step back home?
The foot tripods.
Okay.
There are 3 points in the feet, and I don't care what state any human is in. If you get them correctly to align the feet in the right direction and put the pressure in the right places, it will bring them home. In a way, yeah.
Yeah, do you want to finish that?
Just in a way which, with our guidance, will start to get the firing and wiring happening in a way that immediately tells the body it's safe, supported, engaged, and balanced, literally in seconds.
So what truth did your body teach you that your mind never could have?
Oh, wow. That I have bones that support me when I learn how to use them, that no one can take my bones away from me, that I could lose everything, but as long as I'm living and breathing in this body, I have my bones, and my bones have got me. And they are the most strong, powerful, extraordinary team that I'll ever need to function in this world.
So you went through, obviously, a tremendous amount of trauma. I mean, it's wild. Like, I just met you in the elevator, and you just never know what other people have gone through or what they're going through. Like, never in a million years, even as a writer, could I have written the script of what you've gone through. But what do you think the soul lesson is for everything you've gone through?
I'm still learning that. Sometimes I feel like I can only see a pinprick of who I actually am. I feel that who I am and what I'm here to do is being revealed one step at a time. So I don't know the full picture yet, but clearly, I think there's me, and then there's Ixchel and the medicine that I seem to have brought through. And it's slowly weaving those together. I built a community. I always say my job is done when I can step away, and I know it all continues without me. This is not about me, but it's something very important needed to come through. So yeah, it's, that's why I love to just go and immerse myself in Dr. Joe events and just move into quantum and allow all of that, the ancestral, the intergenerational stuff, that we are really just frequencies. We are the gates for our ancestral lineage. Yeah. And so I am not just me. I am the gateway for everyone who, is part of my DNA and my bones. My bones are going to outlive me. So that there is a frequency, I believe, in our bones that stays, or in our being that stays. So I kind of think it's not just about me. I just happen to be the flag bearer for this lineage of being human at this time. It's something I'm still unpacking. Yeah.
Well, it was beautiful and eloquent, and of course you can only see a pinprick because you're the entire universe stuffed into his body for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, exactly.
So where can people find you?
Well, they obviously can find us online, on websites, we share some stuff on Instagram.
What's your website?
www.ixchelSystem.com. So that's ixchelsystem.com.
Okay.
But what we always want to do is invite people to drop into our community every Monday. We have drop-in sessions, and we invite people to come and have the experience of connecting to their bones, because we want people, we just always want to support people to come home to the bones of who they are. So obviously, you'll have the social media tags, and people can find us, and
for sure,
we can be found. We can definitely be found, and we have lots of freebie things that we do, because it's a new methodology. I mean, I've won innovation awards, tutor of the year from Federation of Holistic Therapy. We're doing something new, hasn't been done before. So people need to come and experience it to kind of really know what it is, it is.
And you can check out the website to see where she'll be around the world.
I'm coming back to New York and California in April. I've just arrived in Paris today because I'm teaching in Switzerland at the weekend, and I'm going down through Spain to teach, and then we're running a practitioner gathering in Portugal. We're all over the place. I'm training practitioners all over the world, which is just blows my mind that it's evolved in that way. But that's the power of what we're doing. Yeah.
I always say, to great souls come great challenges, and the goal is to transmute them into something useful for the world. So you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. I'm so happy we ran into each other at the elevator. So funny.
To create this opportunity for each other.
You were the one creating the opportunity, but I guess I created the opportunity too, because so many people get to hear this. And I hope for the listeners, this is a powerful episode. Please share it far and wide. And, I would love it if you took 2 seconds to rate it, like, comment, subscribe. I really loved speaking with you, and I look forward to
with you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I look forward to us meeting in the 3D again.
But of course we will. I mean, I will come wherever any bones call me. I'll come.
That should be your marketing tagline.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Maybe it needs some tweak.
Yeah. So I'll always come and do little introduction workshops and things with people as well, because I just love it, and I love America. I love coming to America.
Maybe by that time I'll find a place in Denver, and create a little community here or something like that.
Let's do it. I did a week long in Denver in July. I'd love to come back. I think it's beautiful. Those mountains are amazing. So let's do it.
Right on.
All right.
Well, thanks folks for listening. Again, please share this episode. It's a powerful one. I'm Tim Shields. This is the Inciting Incident. We certainly had a powerful one today. Until next time, I wish I had some wisdom to say, but just have a good time. Yeah. Don't take the world so seriously. It's all an illusion. And, the power brokers are just trying to force us against each other. So remember, we're all one. That's what I have for you.